Hello, everybody. I hope that you have a nice weather and nice mood today. We will get a webinar today with our participants. I propose to wait just a little bit until everyone will join us. And as the usual things for webinar, I would like to ask you to put plus if you can hear me clearly. And the picture is clear also, to invite everybody and to write down actually where you are. And it will be very nice for us to know that you are from another part of the world and that you are interested in our webinar. So we are waiting just 2 more minutes, 2-3 minutes, until everyone join us, and we'll start our conversation. Thank you. Okay, I see Valentin from Ukraine. Hi, Miriam, Joseph. Nice to know that you join us. In Luxembourg, everything is clear. Super. Hi, Tatiana from Ukraine and living in London. Nice to see you here on our webinar. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Oksana Harchenko. I'm business development specialist at YouControl company. It is a Ukrainian IT company that is working on the market of open data. Today, it is pleasure mine for me to moderate today's conversation with 2 professionals. It's Marilyn Dua, Compliance Advisory, and Tony Brown, Head of Compliance of IFX Payments. And actually, we plan to hold this meeting with 3 speakers and me. But unfortunately, life makes some adjustments, and Anna Razel got sick, and we wish her a speedy recovery and hope to talk with her at our future meetings. And today we're going to talk about different methods that sanction entities are using to conceal their assets in the UK. So, dear participants, if you have got any questions or suggestions, you are welcome to write them in the chat box. And at the end of our webinar, we will have a Q&A session where we will hope answer all your questions. So now I want to pass the word to Marilyn, and she is our first guest. She has a master's degree in international corporate governance, financial regulation, and economic law at School of Advanced Study. So, Marilyn, can you say several words about yourself and actually your experience?
Sure.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi all, thank you very much for being here. So yeah, as Moxana has introduced, my name is Marilyn. I'm a compliance advisor and I've worked for multiple entities in offshore jurisdictions, so and also in the UK as well. I've worked for banks and financial services who deal with ultra high net worth individuals. And I've also led and developed multiple control frameworks in these type of organizations also. So yeah, that's just a bit about me as well. I guess, am I good to kind of go ahead? Right, perfect.
Yes,
so I'm just going to share my slide with you. We're going to be talking through sanctioned entities and how they conceal assets in the UK. Of course, this is a hot topic considering everything with the ongoing war going on. And so it's important for us to be able to establish the different types of methods are being used in order to launder or move illicit funds, and how we can be vigilant in our organizations also. So as an introduction, here are a few things that we will be exploring. We'll talk through the different type of entity typologies that are being used in order to conceal assets. We'll focus in and zero in on ELPs, so English limited partners or partnerships, what they are, how they are used in order to conceal and move assets. We'll get through a brief overview. We'll look at what the problem is surrounding this as well, and if there are any other types of obscure mechanisms that are used to launder or move assets. Again, we'll look at control mechanisms, and if there are any changes in the laws that are coming our way to provide us with adequate protections, and then what this means for us and our compliance frameworks also. So first and foremost, entity typologies. So for companies, individuals, and or individuals that have been sanctioned, there are many ways for them to hide their connections via countries and organizations, utilizing obscure entity structuring, maybe opaque jurisdictional registration, and multi-layered structures spanning multiple countries in the UK. Again, that's why we see that today in our organizations, one of the AML-CFT questions that are asked are, is this a multi-layered structure? Are we able to easily identify who the ultimate beneficial owner is of this particular structure? And in the UK, more specifically, we've noticed that there are various gaps in regulation and laws governing the incorporation and management of assets flowing through entity types that we will see in a bit. Hiding assets is a process that involves hiding the true ownership of an asset and making them appear to be owned by someone else. It can occur in many different ways, but depending on the structure of your business or the structure of the trust that is used, you can be able to conceal some of the ownership that is at stake. And hiding assets could involve hiding property, valuable items such as artwork, jewelry, and other collectibles. Doesn't just have to be of a monetary value and form. There are many different entity typologies that we see in financial sector today that conceal the true ownership in order to enter into contracts for goods and services and move assets. A common way of doing this, of moving assets, is limited liability companies. Now, these aren't an illegal form of entities at all, to be honest. In fact, there are benefits of using LLCs in order to conduct business. It allows for people to own 100% of the company, and then be able to benefit from the membership shares as well. So if there's multiple individuals or multiple entities used behind the LLC, again, they're able to partition and structure that up. It's a business entity that offers, again, limited liability protection for its owners or those who will be referred to as members. And it means that if something goes wrong with the business, or if you're sued, or your personal assets sometimes can be used as collateral against any judgments awarded. And so again, has benefits. Again, it's not an illegal entity type at all, to be honest. Again, it's the most preferable, and we see it a lot, especially where there are property investments or people conducting businesses with multiple entities also. So that's one entity typology. Our next one is shell companies. Now, these can be a bit tricky, and we do see They can be used, unfortunately, by sanctioned entities as fronts or intermediaries in transactions with sanctioned parties. Again, why companies would be used? Well, it allows parties to access money without revealing their involvement with any sanctioned entity or through direct contact between themselves and those parties. They sometimes operate under another name in order not to be associated with, let's say, for instance, a sanctioned individual. So you might see something like ABC Corp, which might be owned by XYZ Limited. In this case, it'll likely have another owner who could own multiple other businesses in different countries around the world. This is quite problematic for us again, but I don't see too many of these, and in my experience where I've worked, even in private equity, alternative investments, and private banking also, it's not very common that I see shell companies like that, again, because it's just so obscure. But what we're going to be focusing on, like I said earlier on, is English limited partners or English limited partnerships. Okay, they're used for investment purposes. So again, you'll see them in private equity structures or real estate investments, and they provide a way for investors to participate in business while limiting the exposure to potential loss. So again, almost like LLCs, they share some similarities. Again, it's let's limit our liability in here. They offer, like I said, privacy and confidentiality, and they're not designed or intended at all to be used for illegal or unethical purposes. But again, we know that those who are involved in illicit or unethical activities, they will use whatever they can get their hands to use in order to avoid any AML regulations also. So typically we see English limited partners, again, because of the gaps or weak frameworks in law that are being exploited and used in order to push assets through the UK. And we'll go in here. So for the reasons why they are so popular, there are multiple reasons why they're so popular. Again, like I said, they're legitimately used for real estate investment, sometimes even to invest in pension funds. They have tax advantages, and some of them actually don't even have legal personalities as well. So they don't really own anything. They exist purely for contractual basis between their partners. And they're generally treated through like pass-through entities as well, which again, very normal. But I'm going to focus on the particular points. So here for ease of establishment, accessibility, and external management as well. So ease of establishment, well, you're not required, like other entity incorporations, to take board meetings or file annual reports in the same way that other corporations are done for that type of business. So again, it's very easy. It doesn't require too much paperwork, very straightforward there. Accessibility, again, kind of negatively, after 2017, when Scottish limited partners, the rules surrounding how they're incorporated and managed had been changed. A lot of ELPs started to begin being used for money laundering scandals in the name of their own owners as well. So again, accessibility, there is a negative connotation to that, again, because one type of entity type isn't able to be used. Again, it's just, okay, we can use ELPs now. So that's one of the reasons why people are running to them. They're noticing that gap in the laws. And then external management as well. So unlike some corporations, which need to have a board of directors and shareholders who are responsible for overseeing the management of the company, ELPs are typically managed by general partner or partners who are responsible for day-to-day activities. We'll go on later on to look at what they are classed as or what they look like, to be honest. And then they'll introduce the topic of formation agencies being used in order to oversee management of companies as well. So again, so if you want an entity that is kind of, you know, a very light-hearted entity in order to, let's say, do contractual activities, then ELPs are is what is being used in this day today. But that being said, they may be subject still to some legal and regulatory requirements depending on the specific activities and the jurisdictions in which they operate. For the UK, we know, like I said, things are changing in regards to the way ELPs are able to access our markets. and be able to be participants of them also. And even though that they're not required board meetings or filed annual reports in the same way as others, they're still going to have to make their fair share of requirements today. So let's look at how ELPs conceal their legal ownership using their framework. So like I said, they're quite similar to LLCs in that, you know, sometimes they may not have the requirement to identify their real owners. So underlying partners we're talking about here, if they have someone who is a representative or nominee representative on their behalf, and they're not required to publish anything in public records as well, which makes them the ideal vehicle for hiding assets from tax authorities and other people or other agencies that may want to find out who they are and where their money comes from. Instead, any legal rights or obligations of the partnership are held with the individual, so general partners. So it could be the company, or let's say, for instance, the formation agency or another nominated entity that would act as a general partner for the ELP. This means that the partners are jointly and severally liable for their debts and obligations in the partnership. It is possible for ELPs to obtain legal ownership by registering with the UK Companies House as a Scottish limited partnership. I just touched on the fact that now that Scottish limited partnerships incorporation requirements have now changed. But overall, again, we're talking about Scottish limited partners here that have the changes to ELP still at this present moment. No major rule requirement just as yet. And so, yeah. ELPs are now being set up and used as shell companies, although this practice is generally discouraged and may be illegal and unethical. We talked earlier on just about shell companies and how unethical they are, or how they can be unethically used depending on the various circumstances. And it seems like these ELPs are taking this form of this shell company type. Which is typically a business that has no significant assets or operations, and is just a vehicle used for financial transactions, again, contractual obligations there. That can include money laundering, tax evasions, and other illegal activities. It's unfortunate today that ELPs are, again, like I said, they have multiple benefits if used correctly, as any other entity does, but that gap that we're talking about in the laws, that gap in the regulation, is what's making organizations susceptible to wide failures in AML frameworks also. And so our due diligence requirements here are having to be, you know, extremely enhanced in order to ensure that we are not conducting businesses or conducting transactions with these entity types also, especially in the UK today. We're going to touch on the use of formation agencies now. Remember, I said that these ELPs can assign general partners to take their liabilities for them or to operate on their behalf, nominee entities, or so and so forth. And while this is all done by formation agencies, and again, like I would premise and say that the use of formation agencies isn't an illegal or an unethical thing at all. It's just how they are used, because of course formation agencies are set up in order to provide guidance and advice, take control of the preparation and the filing requirements, and they're meant to be providing a registered agent services and offering ongoing support and so on and so forth. But we're seeing today in the news and financial investigative bodies are noticing that there is a major problem with these particular agencies as well, being used to hide basic information from the public, like for instance, hiding information on where the true place of the ELP's business is, who the managers are, the identity of the owners, and it makes it harder for authorities to trace money. So basically, the process is legal, but it can create some issues. In the context of ELPs, formation agencies can provide a range of services, like I've just highlighted here, in order to establish requirements for procedures and setting them up, and taking responsibility with the registration, and providing registered agency services as well. It's important to note, though, that while formation agencies can provide valuable support and guidance, they're not a substitute for qualified legal and financial advice. So it's easy to see a formation agency and think, oh, okay, this ticks the box as, a qualified individual, a more qualified entity, but they're not a substitute for that. In fact, ELPs and other types of businesses, entities can be complex and involve a range of legal and regulatory issues. So this formation agency or these type of formation agencies do not encapsulate the problem, again, if they're just providing advice and guidance, doing the preparation and filing, offering ongoing support, and providing registered agent services. I don't know if you guys, Oksana or Tony, want to jump in on anything I've said so far before I move on to the problem.
It is very interesting to know actually all this list of possible ways of omitting and hiding ultimate beneficiary owners. And what is more maybe interesting and why this is a problem actually.
Yeah, cool. So which will lead me on to just talking about what the problem actually is for us. Again, so yeah, it's undeniable. If we're using a shell company ELP, which we're unable to really establish who members are, what their activities are, what their entity's been set up for, and so on and so forth. But then there's an overarching problem also behind, especially the relationship with formation agencies. I mean, something like, let's say, for instance, implemented proxies and nominee partners. Again, like I just said, unidentified controllers, obscure record business activities, and lack of transparency and accountability. That's like everything that you need in order to destabilize your organization if you're doing business with this type of entity as well. I mean, for instance, using hide proxies and nominee partners for ELPs means that, again, if you conceal the true ownership and control of the partnership, you're facilitating illegal activities such as money laundering, tax evasion, and other forms of financial crime. I mean, where we are in, let's say, for instance, in a bank, for instance, if there is a nominee partner or a nominee agency that we're using, we still have to be able to drill through and be able to say, okay, this nominee partner is, in fact, let's say, for instance, the 100% or 50% nominee controller of this particular personal entity. At the end of the day, we've done our touch through, we've done our drill through to be able to establish the end line, but then also the activities that this nominee partner or proxy does. Now, because many formation agencies use the services of hide proxies, there's like a small fee that's used to agree to act and to stand in on lending, let's say, for instance, signatures on various documents, and can hold bank accounts, the assets, and they can be registered to a London address, say, for instance. And usually what you would see is that where there's a proxy or nominee partner, there'll be multiple maybe ELPs or multiple shell companies that are all registered to the same particular London address, many that are used by the same companies to obscure business activities recorded. This all results to an opaque ownership, which can be used to, like I said, obscure true identity, which is the first failure of any AML CFT framework at all. Nominee partners, say for instance, are appointed to act as official partners of an ELP, but they won't actually have any real control or ownership of the partnership. Instead, they are hired by the actual owners or controllers of the partnership to act as a front or a cover-up for their activities in order to avoid detection and scrutiny from law enforcement and other authorities. Again, hiding behind, again, how do you know a sanctioned entity owns or is the actual individual owner of this particular ELP? Well, let's look at the nominee partner. Let's look at what the nominee partner's activities are, what they do. Have we noticed any other negative information or negative press about them? Do they have any connections with any external parties as well? That's where you start drilling into who the nominee or the proxy is, which is a very important requirement. So this practice is, again, like I said, used as an opaque ownership, and obscures everything entirely from establishing who the owners are to what the asset is and to what the activity is also. I say overall, it's important that ELPs and other businesses operate with transparency and accountability, to comply with all relevant laws and regulations. The use of hired proxies or nominee partners create serious legal and reputational risks. And businesses should seek the advice of qualified legal and financial professionals to ensure compliance and mitigate these risks. And from a processing point of view, from a organizational point of view, financial services point of view, again, we're ensuring that the questions that we're asking surrounding the establishment of identity is relevant to the relationship that we have. Of course, it's not just a matter of, well, we don't know who's behind the scenes. Okay, let's see who's controlling. Let's see who is the manager of this asset, and do they have licenses in order to do so? Is there any negative information surrounding these particular type of individuals or entities? I'm just going to take us through a timeline of cases. I'm not going to touch on all the cases. Again, these particular entities or formation agencies are widely discussed in the media and investigated by financial services and organizations also. I just thought it was interesting to touch on this particular point. Sorry, Oksana.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, should we expect changes of control mechanism and changes in law in the nearest future, and what they be? What should we expect?
Of course, yes. So obviously, the UK has now established that there is a gap in the framework or in the AML-CFT framework in terms of ensuring that the regulations and the rules are encompassing enough in order to protect the markets that are currently going on. So I'm going to talk about that in the next slide or next 2 slides or so. So I'm just going to save that and then give some more information as to what the changes are coming. So yes, there are going to be more changes. The more we find out about these different types of entities, the more we are well informed, and the more that we can do enough to prohibit and prohibit the concealing of illicit assets and funds. So just touching just quickly on this particular case here, LAS Formation Agency. This was a statement that they had given to they had placed on their website as a reason to use them as a formation agency. So now, I mean, it said here that there is no suggestion that LAS or any of its associates or hired proxies participated in or knew of the activities of these companies, even though that they often sign company paperwork for administrative purposes. Okay, so LAS Formation Agency, for those who don't know, is a formation agency that had been unfortunately, or it had been documented that they had used fake signatories. They boasted of setting up entities without the requirement to establish ultimate beneficial ownership. And there's multiple articles of them making millions from being corporate secretaries to Russian nationals and Russian individuals. One particular one that came up was Alexander Vinnik, who was allegedly behind the BTC Bitcoin exchange and was extradited from Greece last year, in order to face charges in the US, where he was accused of helping to launder 4 billion of criminal proceeds. Again, LAS Formation Agency, an agency that was used to, again, here, both of providing advice and guidance, preparing and filing, providing registered agent services, and offering ongoing support. Now, again, this is all kind of alleged out there in the reports, and they're still being investigated as it goes. Yeah, they were known to, or thought to have used a company or been a company who had allegedly operated a platform and used UK shell companies registered to their particular London office. Again, so like what I touched about, saying that they would use the same UK London offices for multiple ELPs or multiple shell companies as well. I mean, in 2017, more specifically, LAS noticed that ELPs, unlike SLPs, were not required to disclose their ultimate owners. So that's what they boasted of on their website, saying that, you know, for instance, listen, we know a way to set up your entities without actually having to go through the ultimate framework. That was kind of like their punchline, you know, as a way of, listen, we know how to make your assets secure, or make it privatized again, because everyone wanted that privatized kind of feel for conducting their activities also. But like I said, these are entities that you can research and look up. LAS Formation, Arrow Network, they all kind of fall within the same bandwidth of entities that have been alleged to be involved with providing proxy services to ELPs and those who are sanctioned individuals. Okay. Let's just see, my time is going quickly. So I'm just going to touch on this very quickly. There are other methods, again, for hiding assets. Some people use trust structures. Some people utilize offshore methods, so offshore bank accounts, offshore proxies, offshore shell companies, nominee directors and shareholders who are based in offshore jurisdictions in order to enter contract for goods. Now, not all of this is, again, illegal, but again, it's the activities behind what these these trust structures and offshore methods are being used for as well. Typically, in a private banking setting, you would usually see utilizing offshore methods for, let's say, for instance, sometimes legal advice, quite a lot from Cayman, and you would also see it in terms of having like a nominee arrangement also. Again, if it makes sense to the client's profile, then again, there's nothing really to really worry about. It's just making sure that you've done your due diligence in order to obtain or ascertain what the understanding of the arrangement is also. I'm just going to go on quickly just to the changes by the UK law. Again, this touches on your question, Oksana, on just what are we seeing? What's coming our way today, and how can we, I guess, what gives us enough maybe legal basis to protect ourselves as well. So now, the UK has noticed that there is a gap, of course, in how ELPs are being incorporated and used in the UK. So in an effort to increase transparency and reduce corporate crime in the process, there are new laws that are being implemented. And currently, when I had looked around the 8th of February, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill was at its second reading in the House of Lords. So it could be any time in the next quarter or next 2 quarters for this to be implemented to resolve the issue. Again, so the aims of this particular type of bill is to broaden the information that is filed in Companies House. Again, like I said, the reason why people were running towards the ELPs was because there's no actual real requirement in order to establish that they are the limited partner behind the ELP, or their management can be outsourced to someone else, a hired proxy, a nominee agent, and so on and so forth. So they're broadening the information requirement that needs to be filed. They're ensuring and they're requesting that those who are setting up ELPs ensure that the information that they are putting out there is kept up to date. So it's not a case of company incorporated in 1970 and there's nothing since then. Again, if there's been no changes, then they would have to document that and say, okay, change of, let's say, for instance, there are no changes of circumstances and it still remains the same till today. They're giving extra powers to HMRC to demand accounting information related to limited partners. And again, they are strengthening the relationship or the link, the nexus between ELPs and SLPs, which have the jurisdiction of registration in, let's say, for instance, the UK or wherever it is that they are located. But again, we're focusing on the UK. So if there is an ELP that's connected to an SLP in the UK, then we need to make sure that we can establish that connection there. In addition, new laws would address how LPs can be dissolved and wound up. So there's not just a matter of poof, disappear, or there is no LP, or the LP just exists for ages and there are no assets, there's no ongoing activities at all. Laws on this particular topic so far have been a bit conspicuous by their absence. So obviously there was no way to strike off an LP from a register, but what this is trying to do is to create a regime which will be helpful to managers looking to dissolve or wind up limited partnership structures and create a tidy up work in the Company House register. We have authorized corporate services providers, so those who will be acting as formation agencies would have to apply to register to be an LP as well, so there's no ambiguity in that. Managers of an ELP will have to relocate the principal place of business of activity, which is key, actually, begin again, if they could get away with ensuring that their activity or their principal place of business is is very kind of up in the air. That was something that people were running towards, but now there's going to be a framework surrounding that. So for example, for tax reasons, or to avoid the need to appoint a full scope depository for the purposes of alternative investment fund management, you need a UK registered office to the LP. And so that gives a lot more clarity in terms of how things are being managed. Like I mentioned earlier on, again, confirmation statements, ensuring that this information is held by Companies House, and that every 12 months, a confirmation statement is filed and submitted. And for any partner that is an individual, we're talking about individual owners here, the person's name, date of birth, nationality, and any former names, usual residential address, that are any part of the UK, or that if, say, for instance, the individual is a resident of, then that will need to be filed. For a GP, a general partner who is an individual service address, which can be the LP's registered office, will need to be filed as well. So the filing requirements are increasing now. So it's getting more and more difficult in order to provide an obscure asset type or asset management type. So say all that to say, in conclusion, we've talked about different ways that the ownership can be hidden, or sanctioned entities can hide their ownership and the assets also. We've looked at the most common methods that are being used, so offshore shell companies, English limited partners, and why that's such a problem for us. The management used by nominee directors, nominee shareholders, proxies. And then we've looked at other options or other types of entities or methods that are being used to conceal and to hide. What we do still expect, unfortunately, is that ELPs and SLPs will continue to be key tools which are used to try and conceal these assets. But again, like I said, they're always going to be used anyways for legitimate purposes. So used for structuring private funds, carry vehicles, and facilitating this easy flow through of assets for their investment purposes. Also, there is a material change. Now we see that is happening. That's going through. Like I said, 8th of February, I checked that it was passed at the House of Lords. And so what we will see as a key takeaway is that there are legal requirements that are changing for these particular type of entity types. And although they will still remain popular amongst institutional investors, we will now be able to be more informed about how they should be managed. So again, if we're conducting due diligence, we should know that from law, these companies are required to ensure that their confirmation statements are filed every 12 months. If they don't have one, then it's a matter of going out to request for one before you do business with them, ensuring that the information is kept up to date, ensuring that information related to their limited partners or ELPs is all clear and documented for us as an organization, as a bank, as a financial services also. So there are tick boxes that we should be considering when it comes to dealing with ELPs. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Marilyn, for such a comprehensive information about all the possible problems, and actually good news about changes in legislation.
Sure.
And I would like to invite Tony to our discussion and to ask him, would you like to add something what Marilyn said? And
I'll just start by saying I really enjoyed that, Marilyn. I actually forgot I was a speaker for a minute there, and I was just watching, enjoying the presentation. I was like, I'm on camera. I just, but I guess I would, look, Marilyn did such a good job of summarizing that up. I have very little to add, but I suppose what I would say, I was kind of following some of the conversation that's going on in the chat as we're going. Firstly, it's the first time I've ever been on a webinar where people are having constructive conversations in the chat. So shout out to the attendees for that. It's a good sign of a good crowd. But a few things that I would say is, all of those things that Marilyn has explained today, for me as a sort of head of compliance, I know I'm not doing my intro yet, but they're all just red flags, right? Why would I do business with a shell company, with a company that's deliberately set up to hide its true origins or its true, true owners? But unfortunately, these things do happen, and they are, exploited on a global scale. What we've done, or what rather I've done at IFX, is we've just kind of we have a policy that says any of those things are just outside of our risk.
Yeah.
That's easy for me to say because we have a finite number of products and etc. But there was a couple of comments there like, how on earth do we get rid of these things? Well, I suppose it starts with us as compliance professionals to decide what is and what isn't within our risk appetite. And the other thing I was going to say, just in addition to that, is I actually learned something from this today, Marilyn. Thank you. I'm very familiar with Scottish limited liability partnerships and Scottish limited partnerships because they were very, very commonly used in the Danske Bank money laundering scandal. The perfect example, set up with proxy directors and or UBOs that are other entities in other jurisdictions for the sole purpose of moving illicit funds from country to country. And the English limited partnerships, ELPs, etc., are kind of not really the answer to that, I don't think, but maybe one step in the right direction. Anyway, I actually can't add a whole lot. I thought it was really good, so thank you.
No problem at all, to be honest. I think again, with the Scottish limited partners and the limited partnerships and English limited partnerships, they share similarities, right? To be honest with you, it just seems that, I mean, sometimes regulation and laws can be a little bit behind the curve, but as you had touched on, it's up to us as compliance professionals. What products and services are we offering, and what is a complete no-no for us? What do we not want to get involved in activities wise again? But like I said, from a perspective of where I've worked for an alternative investment fund manager, I mean, seeing LPs, not so much ELPs, but seeing LPs being used for investment vehicles is quite normal. It's not, and it dependent on our products and services, but it's for the purposes. What's a business activity? Are we asking the right questions surrounding our risk appetite as well? Are we able to measure that and ensure that we have an ongoing monitoring for this particular type of entity type as well? And what does our internal framework look like as well? So that, again, sometimes the answer isn't just scrapping them entirely. Sometimes the answer is just governing them and ensuring that they can be used for, for good purposes rather than to be used illegally. It's with anything, So,
well, as you say, and there's a few comments there, and I know some of them are probably tongue in cheek, but you do raise the question as well. These, like anything, right? Things exist for a purpose, and you like to think, if you've got your sort of rose-tinted glasses on, that these things will be used for those specific vehicles. So special purpose vehicles, special purpose acquisition companies or SPACs, as somebody mentioned. The idea is that they're set up, they serve a purpose, and then that purpose is executed. But anybody who's up to no good latches onto them and exploits the weaknesses. And if I can say this, and I'm just going to say it anyway.
Go ahead.
By the way, I should caveat all comments on my own. My comments do not represent this organization. I think there's just a very common lack of understanding in our sector as compliance professionals as what these things are. So people miss the red flags. And that's why conversations like today are so important. I'm conscious of time.
No.
I'm also,
it's okay. Go on, Tony. I just want to ask you how actually the situation with increasing sanction affects payments, regular one, and actually in cryptocurrency, as you are expert in this field. So please share your knowledge with us.
Yeah, I suppose I should probably say I wish I'd gone first as well, because it's a tough act to follow, Marilyn. But good news is we're slightly overrunning, so I only have to do 10 minutes. Hello, everybody. My name's Tony Brown. I am Head of Risk and Compliance and MLRO at IFX Payments. I've been working in financial services for pretty much 20 years now, and I would say almost all of that time has been spent in regulatory compliance. I do have a passion and a focus on anti-financial crime. When I say that, I mean all things AML, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, fraud, and sanctions. And I wanted to, I think there's a natural kind of continuation from Marilyn's piece about things that are done to disguise the origins of these things. Where my conversation picks up on that is on the assumption that these entities are transacting and are getting onboarded. What does it look like thereafter? So there's hopefully a bit of a natural progression in terms of my slides. Nobody will want mine afterwards because they're mostly just for my own benefit to keep me on track. So I've kind of briefly introduced myself. I do have quite a lot of experience in this space. My career has kind of spanned across both public and private sector. And I also have spent a bit of time in my career, about 6 or 7 years as an auditor and a managing consultant. So I worked for PwC for a number of years. And I worked with a bit of a who's who in terms of, the tier 1 banks around Canary Wharf. Funnily enough, different banks with different branding on the front, but very much the same problems inside. I then kind of decided to kind of re-energize my career, if you like, by moving into sort of the fintech space, as it's now called, alternative finance, and most recently have been involved in a number of crypto projects. But my day job very much is kind of head of compliance and MLRO of a global payment firm. I'm going to touch on a few things today. So what actually it looks like in terms of, particularly with an emphasis on when I say Russia and Russian sanctions, I should probably emphasize, I do mean post-Ukrainian conflict. So what happened last year and where we are today. But I suppose it is important to remember that the concept and the ideas of economic sanctions and oligarchs has been around for some time. It's just that it's very much under the spotlight right now. And I suppose it raises a kind of, what's the word? Like, not a philosophical question. I suppose it raises a big question, which is, have we done enough in the past to impact the economic resources available to oligarchs and other, significant party members that has led to getting into today's conflict? That's a kind of open question. Global payments, looking at sanctions in general, what's happening here and now, and how it's impacting me and my firm, to give you some kind of real life examples to take away. And then I'll touch on cryptocurrency at the end. So I'm going to move through this at a little bit of pace, just to keep it punchy. But please do raise any questions, etc. We can always circle back around. So IFX, it probably helps to explain who we are and what we do. So IFX is kind of what we'll call these days a fintech, but the way I would describe it is we're a UK EMI. We specialize in providing global treasury and global payment services to businesses and individuals that have that requirement. We have multi-currency accounts and we can execute payments in most currencies globally. We are issuing digital IBANs, so the idea is that our clients can kind of log in and book their own business, and we obviously facilitate that. So as a global business with global clients and global payment routes, I can just tell you, we had been trading ruble. We had been onboarding Russian clients and beneficiaries in Russia, so payments to and from Russia, up until what hopefully the things I'm going to say on to what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to be matter of fact. So I know the crisis is still ongoing. I'm very, very aware of that. So please do bear with me. But literally, when we saw that the tanks and the troops were approaching the borders, we took the decision there and then to sever all ties with Russia, because I think it was fairly obvious what was going to happen. But it doesn't stop there, right? So we made the decision to shut down all routes in and out of Russia through our business, to cease doing business with Russian entities in any capacity, essentially internal sanctions, if you like. And we closed all open trades with ruble and just got rid of it off the books. So that is quite an extreme way of doing things. But given the severity of the situation and given the very, very human cost of the crisis, we felt that that's what we wanted to do, and I think it was a good decision. So what happened next? Funnily enough, almost immediately, we see a surge in new businesses and new opportunities coming from ex-Soviet or very well-known linked countries to Russia. So Cyprus, Estonia, Azerbaijan, Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, to name a few. There's a few others, but they would sit outside of our risk appetite in terms of non-EEA countries. But nevertheless, it couldn't be more obvious, right? You close one door, people try and then move funds into other avenues. So all of a sudden, we've got a huge influx of applications for newly incorporated entities in Cyprus, looking for global payment routes to PSPs and banks in places like, the countries I've just mentioned, to name a few. And, you kind of left with a kind of a moral decision, right? So by the book, by policy, by letter of law, we've taken some evasive action to close down routes to Russia, yet we're seeing an influx of payments here and there. So it kind of comes back then to, as a compliance officer, as a head of compliance, understanding the very real and the very fast changing risks that pose you and your business, and being able to make agile changes. And that's why, I do personally enjoy being back in the sort of world of fintechs, because we can make these decisions so quickly. Some of the policy changes is a matter of me speaking to the board and saying, guys, this is happening. This has been reported in the news. I want to do X and Y, getting those decisions, and then being able to change our systems ad hoc. So contrary to what I've seen in previous roles in the banks, there's a lot of red tape. There's lots of people that need to be included in decisions. There's whole reams of bureaucracy. So I suppose that's something that I would get. I don't know the makeup of our listeners today, but what I would say is kind of take a look at your own role and take a look at how quick and agile you are at being able to make these changes, using this as an example. What else can we do? I think it's important to remember that somebody once said this to me, and at the time I didn't really know what it meant, but I kind of learned, having come back to sit in the hot seat. So as I say, I was consulting for a while, very much telling people what I think they should do. It's very different when you're the one that's in the hot seat again, needing to make the decisions. But he said to me, there is no risk until there's risk. And I kind of thought, well, what on earth does that mean? But I guess what it means is there are an infinite number of reasons why businesses exist, and there are an infinite number of reasons why people want to move money. But you need to decide and put your controls in place to what your business does, what your risk appetite as a business. And I'm guessing a lot of people on this call will be compliance professionals or business owners themselves. So we ourselves set those frameworks. When I say how does this impact me, I don't mean me. I mean collectively, how does it impact us? How does it impact IFX? Well, put simply, it's quite obvious that payments that are being routed into these conflict zones are there for the sole purpose of serving the conflict. So it's providing boots on ground, weapons, etc., to go out and conduct these acts of terror, if you like. And I at the time that we put these blocks in place, a number of good businesses, legitimate businesses, came to me pushing back on or saying, you can't do this, etc. My challenge to them was, in a situation where there's a global crisis, a war is going on and this is happening here and now, what legitimate business rationale do you have for being able to move funds in and out of these regions where there is an active war? And unless it's for humanitarian purposes, to provide aid, charity, external support for the victims and for the country of Ukraine, I can't get comfortable with it. Well, actually, does that lesson not kind of transpire to everything that we do in a business? It's very easy to latch our current controls and practices around the live conflict, but money laundering hasn't just become a thing recently. It's been going on for centuries, if you like, decades, certainly. Terrorist financing, that occurs here, now and everywhere, and it has done for a long time. So I suppose it takes a crisis or a focal point, like the Danske Bank scandals, like the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for us to suddenly go, oh goodness, we need to check our controls and do a line in the sand review of where we're at and how we got here. But actually, my challenge to all of us on this call is that not what we should be doing all the time? We'll come back to that. So sanctions, right? So I suppose I should start off by saying, I am not an economic sanctions expert. I haven't studied, global economics or anything like that. All of my knowledge and experience with sanctions comes from working in the financial sector. I want to kind of give some real life feedback as to how this is impacting me currently, and me again, I mean IFX as well. Because I think it's extremely topical, and I think it's stuff that people here will hopefully want to either think, oh, I hadn't thought about that, I'll go away and look at that internally, or hopefully, yes, I did the same thing, that gives me comfort. But economic sanctions, so I think we've got to start off with the question, what is the purpose of sanctions? The purpose of sanctions is to restrict economic resources and assets to regimes and individuals, and I guess entities that otherwise would use them for purposes that, the global consensus is wrong, immoral, illegal, etc. And when we look at sanctions, we know historically sanctions are countries where there are humanitarian issues like, dictatorships and civil war, where there are, blood diamonds, for example, we've seen in the past, where there is active terrorism, Somalia with the pirates and ISIS cells, and etc., etc., etc. We very much fixate on the ideas of these are terrorists, these people are using these funds to carry out their attacks. But actually, as we know, thematically, economic sanctions can be applied to anyone to restrict the ability to continue doing what they're doing. So obviously, it's apparent to everybody on this call who works in the sector, the rate at which individuals and entities are being added to the sanctions list at the minute is rapid. There are changes almost daily, and the fixation is trying to continue to restrict access to funds to fuel the current crisis, but also to preemptively sort of sever the ability to send those payments that would otherwise be used for those things. So I don't know if anybody else has found this, but there's a major number of alerts coming up on my transaction monitoring and alert screening, which, if nothing else, is more work. We need more time, more effort, more resource. Does it actually really constitute restricting access to economic resources for these individuals? I don't know. And I suppose, I guess I'm kind of positioning this at, very high level, but I suppose the big question is, when historically as a sector, right, we think about sanctions and we think about the cost of getting it wrong, i.e., if I make a payment that I shouldn't have and it's gone to a sanctioned person or crossed a sanctioned border, we will get wrong. We will get told off. We will get fined. We will get in trouble with our regulator. And I think it's very real, very stark reminder these days. You just have to put the news on that actually, the human face at the end of these, issues in the Ukraine is there. And the knock-on effect of that isn't the fear of getting it wrong, because for me personally, it's not the fear of getting in trouble with the regulator. It's the fear of knowing that you facilitated a payment that had a very human cost. And I suppose, it's difficult to take away from that what any adverse media and any reputational damage that might have to you and or your business should that happen. I think unfortunately, that's something that I've seen business, when I say business owners, business operators, I mean boards, CEOs, COOs, CFOs, for example, are still in that mindset of, well, we'll get it wrong, there's fines in play, but I think that there's a much more severe consequence of getting things wrong currently. Positioning all that is very scary, but actually, there are good things out there to help us be able to continue to do good business, normal business during times of conflict, during times of global economic change. But some real challenges that have occurred to us recently, and this is what I've been building up to. We all pretty much these days, I would imagine 99.9% of people these days have third-party providers, vendors that screen payments for sanctions, for PEPs, for negative news, and probably transaction monitoring as well, right? But we almost place blind reliance on these. So we put information in, we type our customers' names in, or the directors, the UBOs, etc. And we put reliance on these systems that if any of these people are added to the sanctions list, we'll get notified about that. And then you say, well, actually, we've also got fuzzy logic. So even if someone's name is close to one of these sanctioned people, we'll be able to find it. And I am going to name names. We use Comply Advantage, and we have had a number of issues recently where payments have been flagged by our banking partner that otherwise have been passed through our transaction monitoring tool. And where it ties in with what Marilyn has been saying is there is a current trend for particularly Russian entities, and people will be familiar probably with the idea of the 50% ownership rule. So we have had a number of examples where an entity is 50% more owned by another entity, and the parent entity is sanctioned or linked to sanctioned entities, right? Our screening tool is only able to capture the subsidiary if it's owned and operated in the same country as its originating sanction. So to put that into perspective, a Russian bank that has a Cypriot subsidiary and owns 50% more of it will not currently be flagged by a transaction monitoring system like Comply Advantage because it's not in Russia. So it would have to be a Russian bank owns a Russian subsidiary. I did not know that until I did, which led to quite a large-scale remedial action. Now, luckily for us, as I say, we already severed ties with Russia, so it was very, very simple for us to find anomalies. What that involved for us was adding all of the known ex-Soviet states and all of the known active Russian linked countries to a, I hate the word, but like to our, well, risk list, if you like, blacklist, risk list, watch list, whatever you want to call it. What that did for us, like the idea of a blacklist suggests that it's like closed off forever. The way our monitoring tool deals with a blacklist is it is flagged for human review. So hard stops on payments before somebody can review and assess them. Long story short, there was only a handful of payments that it impacted, and we were quite lucky. But I would urge you all to understand now and go away and look at your monitoring tools and look at what the controls are around 50% ownership and more, because it goes hand in hand with Marilyn's piece about deliberately opaque structures, deliberately complex structures, and entities that are owned and operated across multiple jurisdictions. Everything that was said today has been centered around the idea of bad guys doing bad things. Here's one for you. I've never had this before either. Funnily enough, not every single person in Russia is dodgy, and not every single person in Russia is supporting the war. And not every rich Russian person is a proxy of Putin or you know, we might call them an oligarch, but actually oligarch just means a rich Russian person. We have had an example, and I've got to be really careful here because there's NDAs coming out of my eyes, but a well-known, actually, let's just say they're called Tony Brown, right? Because then I won't go wrong, right? So Tony Brown is a rich Russian dude who made his money in Russia because he is from Russia and he's got generations of family wealth. Has moved and left Russia generations ago and repurposed themselves in the UK and Europe, has now got a family, and generational family wealth has been passed down to my daughter and my son. The family has been sanctioned under the duress of they could, if they wanted to, make billions and billions of pounds worth of money available to the Russian regime, you know, by hook or by crook, forced or wanting to. Let's just leave it at that. However, their net worth, their gross global net worth, actually is turning the wheels of industry. There are businesses globally that are absolutely nothing to do with Russia, absolutely nothing to do with even trading with Russia, that in theory are now directly impacted by the individual family being put on a sanctions list. So my question to you is, what if some of these you know, if I want to use specific examples, some of these businesses are things like hotels, These are stately homes, you know, just random things that have nothing to do with this. There are people like us, you and I, family members, that aren't getting paid. These businesses are struggling and you know, falling apart, if you like, because the Russian net worth cannot be used to pay its bills. So the question that I was raised was, how does the conflict in Russia impact a legitimate UK business that's absolutely nothing to do with it, just because it has a UBO somewhere up an ownership chain that happens to be Russian? That is a dilemma. So the answer is it can be done, actually. And, you know, let's just say it took a number of flights and face-to-face meetings for me to actually genuinely get comfortable with the risk perception. But you can apply to OFSI. So OFSI are the ones that have sanction listed, you know, Tony Brown. You can apply to OFSI for specific contracts and specific permissions to execute payments that would otherwise be blocked. So what that means is I have got, and I am simplifying it for the purposes of time. How are we doing for time, by the way?
Okay.
Okay, you can do it.
You should finish your thought, and it's very interesting for everybody, I think. And many questions arise already in chat.
You can do it. You can apply for specific contracts to execute payments. I was about to do a bit on crypto. Have I still got time?
Yeah. Well.
Okay. I'm not sure how many people even deal with crypto or from crypto backgrounds here, so it might actually just be for information purposes anyway. All of these closed routes, as I said, you close down one corridor, another one opens. A lot of businesses and payments, as I've seen, have tried to go through traditional fiat payments through Cyprus and Moldova, etc., and they've been shut down too. So here's some sort of staggering statistics for you. 43% of all 2022's illicit crime volume in the cryptocurrency space was linked to sanctions. So almost 50% of all crime was sanctions related. Contrast that to perceptions of crime historically. We fixate on money laundering, to some degree terrorist financing and fraud, but sanctions has now made up almost 50%, well, probably less than 50%, but 40 to 50% of all global illicit activity. I think that is got to be a first in history. Also, you know, we're talking about 20 billion here of transactions in the last 12 months. Real figure. I think it's a heck of a lot more than that. You could probably add a 0 to that number, and that's probably the real statistics. The majority of these sanctions-related issues have come from a Russian exchange called Garantex. No surprise there. I've actually put on the slide here all of the entities and known individuals in the crypto space that have been sanctioned. These sit outside of, you know, OFSI and the traditional ones. But there's some interesting takeaways here, and it goes back hand in hand with Marilyn's piece about disguising and disguising the true origin of payments and disguising the true origin of who those payments belong to. And crypto, you know, I personally am a fan of not necessarily cryptocurrency per se, but I do love the concept and the methodology of the blockchain. But anyway, there are a number of ways that cryptocurrencies can be used to layer funds to disguise true origins. You'll have heard of hopefully things like mixers and tumblers and stuff like this, where illegitimate funds are put in the mixer with illegitimate funds are mixed in with legitimate funds to then be sent in bulk here, there, and everywhere. And there are also coins, exchanges, and wallets that are deliberately set up to be anonymous. And that kind of links back to some of the questions that we were seeing before about entity types. Entity types can be set up to be deliberately anonymous. So can cryptocurrency payments too. And I suppose my big takeaway from that, and I do apologize for going through things at such pace, is why would somebody do something like this? Like, for me, a company that's set up to deliberately set up companies to deliberately hide other companies, to deliberately hide origins, like, that's just something I don't want to touch at all and never will. No matter how you dress it up, no matter how many legal opinions you can give me, I'm just not touching it. And that's my prerogative as an MLRO, as a head of compliance. And I suppose I would just encourage everybody to continue to challenge the status quo. I would rather have an argument in the boardroom than an argument in court about why I did it or didn't do a payment. And I think that's something that we can all agree with. Again, apologies for the pace at which I've moved through that, but I'm happy to open it up to questions and comments.
Oh, it's okay, Tony. Thank you very much for your professional view, and at the same time, a very bright example connected with Tony Brown, an explanation how to deal with this case. So let me tell you several words about our system, which helps to identify actually these connections. And it is always good to use not only information from open sources, but I think it's more easier for you. I mean, like compliance specialists and those who are dealing with sanctions and checking information about entities. It's having some kinds of tools which will help you to, which will save your time and will help you to find exactly to find exactly the person or entity you are looking for. And I would like to say that we, company YouControl, Ukrainian IT company, has been doing everything to provide customers with possibility to do this check with the help of our service through assets. It is a service that combines the information from more than 25 countries. Actually, it is information from registers, and it is reliable source of information. It is open data source of information, and it compiles the information about former CIS countries, political exposed persons. It contains the biggest data set about actually political exposed persons from Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and it's easier to see their assets inside of our system. What is our advantage is that it is possible to see all possible weak areas of spelling names because actually it may be some kind of question for European and actually for foreigners to understand Slavic letters and how it can be spelled in different jurisdictions. And there is a possibility to see whether the company with the same name exists in different jurisdictions, because it is not the rare case when Russians are registered company in Cyprus, in some other offshore zones with the same actually title and sometimes with the same directors and ultimate beneficiary owners. And our system helps you to see whether it is possible to find such similarity in different jurisdictions. And it's not necessary to jump from one jurisdiction register to another jurisdiction register to do this search. So let me show you some case as to actually the possibility to check to check the entity in our system, and I would like to show you how it looks like. It is quite simple right now, and we may actually check the information to put title of the company into a searching line. And what we may see is just imagine that some company came to you with a cooperation offer and you need to check it. You just insert the title of the company or a registration number into the searching line, and exactly the system itself shows you that it has a connection with politically exposed persons, and we should actually find this connection. So we open dossier of the company, and we see that this VDT Nominees Limited is registered in Cyprus. There is an incorporation date and also some information, and the source where we have taken this information also included, and a short summary. If we look attentively to the owners, we will find that it is another actually company, and it's not a rare case when Russians are hiding their assets behind seven locks. And so we see another company which is also registered in Cyprus. And should we open again owner and see another company, should go directly to the dossier of this KLMR Limited, and again it is Cyprus. We should look at owners and see another company like coal company. It's difficult to even pronounce the name of the company, but it happens with these letters. And so coal company Neriun Griol also has assets in there and shares in their owners. And we may see that one of them is Kolmar Administration Company. Before that, we have seen like some trick like KLMR, title of the company. And here we have already vowels in the name of the company, but they are connected, as we see. And if we pay attention to actual Kolmar Group GSC, and we see already the tax individual number of the company, and actually it gives us understanding that it is taken from IGRU. It is a Russian registration service. And we may find also assets and shares of this company. It's another company, and it's already Volga Group. It is a Russian company. And if we will put the title of the company in such a searching line, we will see more information about this company. And we see already that it has sanctions. And in our system, you may see what actually the list of sanctions that are described here, to what they belong to. And also, we may find the information about director. It is Gennady Nikolaevich Timchenko. And what we may know about him is that he, the date of birth, and that he has some relation to Russia, to Finland, to Armenia. Actually, he was born in Armenia, and he was born in the family of a military officer and former armed force of USSR, and spent part of his life, childhood, in the GDR. And actually, he even graduated from the school, from Ukrainian school in Volgrad, which is Odessa region. And he is owner of a private investment group, Volga Group. Specializing in investments in energy, transport, and infrastructure assets. We may see here actually the title of sanctions. Again, he is exposed to, and there are quite a lot of them. So what else? We understand from this point of view that all those like lists of companies which we have seen before prior has the connection with this person, and it can be not the direct sanctions which you may got by cooperating with this company, but at least secondary sanctions, it will be difficult to omit and explain. So should be very careful and look exactly as to the what kind of person or company you are trying to work with. So it is just simple and quick way of checking, and usually it may takes more time and more like expanded web of companies and connections. Anyway, it is possible to see all the assets the person that belongs to that person, and what kind of other like connections he has, and it's will save your time, and you will get a better result at the end. I would like to say that it is sometimes it's not enough to use just one tool to see all possible and necessary information. But when you are combining several of them, you will get the better result, and you will get a more percentage of assurance that you have made a nice decision as to the collaboration or not. I would like to say that we will supply all the participants of our webinar with access to our system, and you will be able to use it to try and to make your own decision as to it, and probably we hope that we will get a feedback from you as to our system, because we are constantly developing it and answering, actually trying to do each actually answer to all the requests of our clients and our users to make it better, and we are still doing it. So if we got any questions, I would like actually probably is it possible to scroll down all those chat communication, because a lot of questions already exist in it, and hope Tony has got enough time to write answers.
I tried to do it throughout, so I tried to address as many as I can, but I suppose did we have some questions that were actually pre-submitted? So they might be a good way to get the ball rolling. I can always,
I would like to read.
If anybody has anything that hasn't been captured in the chat during mine or Marilyn's conversation, please re-add it now, and then we can get the ball rolling with the preempted ones. Yeah. Okay.
And while doing registrations, we have got several questions from our audience, and I would like to read them and hope you will actually answer. How can we identify the real criminal with the increasing threats of synthetic IDs?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that people, sorry, Malin, I'm just jumping in. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that there's been major developments. I mean, I've seen some absolutely insane copies of driver's licenses, passports, etc. online. I think like this isn't a new thing, right? So as we get more sophisticated as compliance professionals at combating, the professional criminals are almost 1 or 2 steps ahead. Unfortunately, the only way to be absolutely certain is to meet somebody face to face and go, yeah, that is you. Obviously, that's not going to happen for most of our business. What I would say to you is, if you believe, so like, I suppose it's the immediate risk with things like false documents, and we always fixate on the idea of it being used for fraud, but actually, you know, fake documents can be used to be also able to disguise true origins of true UBOs, etc. So it's all of financial crime. If you feel that you have a big exposure to that, which if you execute any payment, you definitely do, you have to look at what you're doing to combat that. So something that we've brought into IFX isn't just getting a passport and selfie, but we also use biometric verification, which is not an exact science, but when you have the true liveness test, I re-emphasize that, that's not the same as likeness test. Liveness test, it will start to do a recording. So our system, for example, starts recording and it captures people blinking, the hand movements and stuff like this. So we also get them to read out a sentence. So it might be like, yes, my name is Tony Brown, I want to open an account with IFX. These are all ways of showing that at least the individual is a live person and is who they are, because it then kind of cuts out the idea of somebody's got a fake document. Like, you can fake a document, you kind of easily fake your own face. I don't know if that's a good way of summarizing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always just about kind of trying to stay 2 steps ahead. I would love to go to Lagos, by the way. I've never been, but I would like to go. I have been to Cameroon and saw some of the same issues there, but I've never been to Nigeria. I'm just trying to compromise as we go on.
Okay, we have a question to Marilyn. What are you, sorry. Just a second. What are your views around SPACs? They are a clear legal entity structures used in the Benelux region.
So I think talking about special purpose acquisition companies, I think, yeah. SPACs, yeah. My opinions of them, again, they are, so it goes back to kind of what I said in the in my slides in terms of the purpose of these entities and what they're being used for and what your risk appetite of your organization is as well. So from working in the private equity space and arena, I haven't come across too many SPACs, to be very honest with you. Probably personal investment vehicles. I think these are the type of vehicles that you use if you're acquiring assets or acquiring a large body of organization as well. I think I read that a number of these large banks like Credit Suisse and stuff like that are using this. So again, it's their business profile, it's the kind of activity that they engage in when it comes to acquisitions or mergers and acquisitions, but more specifically on the acquisition part. So my thoughts on it, again, I'm trying to stay pretty kosher here, but in terms of what is the business activity that I'm doing in my organization, and what is the purpose of this particular type of SPAC? Obviously, they're governed by their own particular rules. If you're not able to acquire a particular acquisition within a limited amount of time, then you're going to have to forfeit the assets or forfeit the engagement of the activity as well. So there are some guidelines and rules surrounding it as well. I think it's something that's pretty used quite heavily in the US more than it is in the UK. Say that with a caveat, but I haven't come across many SPACs more specifically. So sticking with this activity, yeah.
I love anyone who's heard me speak before knows I love my little anecdotes. So
yeah.
I always use the pineapple test, and this is something that if it looks like a pineapple, it feels like a pineapple, it tastes like a pineapple, it's probably a pineapple.
Exactly.
But obviously these things are deliberately set up to taste and smell like a pineapple. And actually, here's another example, and I just thought it was perfect, right? We had a scenario. This is nothing to do with SPACs, right? But there was a scenario where a 21-year-old gentleman from the Caribbean moved to Poland and set up like exotic fruits import business, which to me makes sense. So he's importing pineapples and things like that from the Caribbean where they grow and selling them in Poland where people want to eat them. That seems totally normal, doesn't it? From the outset, yeah. But actually, when you start to scratch beneath the surface, this is a 21-year-old guy. I know you shouldn't say he's too young, but he is inexperienced. Right? He doesn't speak a word of Polish. He has no family connections in Poland. He doesn't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend in Poland, right? And the first transaction he does is to a different country to do with leather, right? So all of a sudden, the pineapple that looked and tasted and smelled like a pineapple suddenly doesn't seem to be operating like a pineapple. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, if you've got a SPAC that's set up for the acquisition of a public, like these are usually public listed entities and
public offerings, I believe,
acting on as right. So if it's set up for a specific purpose, then all the documentation and the narrative that you're collecting from your customer should be totally consistent with it. And then actually, you know, it all kind of makes sense. But you start digging and asking questions and you're getting vague answers or things that don't add up, right? Either they're too inexperienced to understand what a SPAC is and shouldn't be using it, or there's something a bit more fishy going on.
Correct.
And I would like to ask one more question to Marilyn. It's about actually what is the legitimate benefits of using a limited partnership over a limited company?
Yes, that's a good question, to be honest. I think it's limited liability, really. In the private equity functional structure, you would have LPs who will subscribe to be able to invest their funds into the main fund that would be going on to acquire a property or acquire a building or invest in real estate and so on and so forth. So investing as an LP, my liability is limited. I'm protected by the general partner. General partner is going to manage this investment. They're going to the ones that are going to create my prospectus for how I'm going to invest, when I'm going to get my money back, and so on and so forth. So my back is covered from an investment point of view, as opposed to putting myself on the line and being a limited company, which is quite a rigid structure to be able to invest in that requirements. Most people who go into investments, or most entities that go into investments, go in as LPs anyways. It's common, it's normal. So yeah, from that perspective, then limiting liability is probably the key thing that denotes that as well. The reason why I would go in or as an LP or set up one as well. Tony?
Some of the biggest companies in the world are LLPs. So
yeah.
PwC, EY,
Yeah.
it's a way of sharing equity. So it's
Correct.
also, when the business does well, sharing equity, fairly amongst the partners. And as you say, it's about making sure that if there was something that like again, PwC, I can only use these guys because I work there, but if they got sued for something really bad, like PwC is on the line as the entity, not necessarily the partners themselves. I don't necessarily agree with that, but by the way. However, if you have a newly incorporated LLP in some random place that the documents don't stack up and the constituting documents don't add up, I'm not saying every LLP has to be a multi-global national business, but again, it just comes down to the pineapple test. Does it
make sense?
Does that make sense for the purpose? Like, why would somebody set this up for legitimate purposes?
Correct.
And actually, don't be afraid to just ask that question. Polina's asking in the chat, how can we be less intrusive?
Yeah.
Just don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Again, I'll get down off my soapbox here, but one of the things that I've found to be quite beneficial is just remember, right? If I collect, I'm trying to be politically correct here. Osama bin Laden's passport, right? I've ticked the box because I've got the KYC on file, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. So documentation only tells us so much, but the narrative behind it is so going back, the reason why I wasn't happy with that is because I got our salespeople to speak to that 21-year-old guy and ask him the questions. So why setting up in Poland anyway? I know you need euros to dollars and stuff like that. So you did you study in Poland? Like, asking general questions that are actually just building rapport, but in reality, when these things feed back to me in compliance, I'm going, hang on a minute, guys, something doesn't. So
yes, it's up to you to decide how to be less intrusive, but sanctions and fines for this not asking questions will not be asking how can we be less intrusive.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's all said in the know your client requirements, right? So like you said, just establishing that rapport, that relationship. So what do you do? What have you been doing? What is your source of wealth? Where, how often do you expect like this influx of money to be going in and out? And so on and so forth, just so that you get a full encapsulated picture as well. And it's something that we use very much in banking and in private equity. These are kind of questions that we're asking surrounding the know your client element and in our enhanced due diligence. Like you said, you can get the picture of the passport, you've ticked that box, but okay, well, is that who is this individual? What do they do? Political exposure, sanctions exposure, those kind of things you'll answer kind of and primarily behind the scenes. But as you're interacting with the client, you're finding more about the body of who they are. And how that fits, how this individual fits the piece of your particular model or your particular organization as well. It's got to be practical about how you ask your questions, I think. Yeah.
And I think the last question to Tony is, how does travel rule impact the monitoring process?
For the crypto stuff, travel rule. So for people who aren't completely up to date with what the travel rule is, the travel rule is a kind of a new addition to the world of crypto. So it's designed to, theoretically, it's designed to operate a bit like the wire transfer regs and obligations under like the payment services directive. So when an institution sends a payment to another institution, let's say a bank paying another bank, there's a requirement that a minimum or minimus amount of information is provided in the transcript that can easily identify that payment. So things like an account number, partial name or full name, etc. So if and when somebody needs to investigate a series of payments, you can get it. You can find the information to. Also, like just operationally, you need to be able to find payments on your system. Well, cryptocurrency, obviously the benefit of crypto and how crypto works is, whilst it is peer-to-peer, the blockchain is the sort of ledger of truth. And actually, when you look at crypto like holistically, there's goodness knows how many coins now. There's X number of exchanges and new ones all the time. There's new numbers of blockchains. They want the travel rule to basically apply that same principle. So attaching enough information to the transfer data, the transaction data, so that when those funds move around exchanges and, let's be honest, cross borders, etc., there's enough information to follow it back to its source. The trouble with the travel rule is each country is interpreting the requirements differently. So the way that the UK is imposing it is different to the rest of Europe, North America, etc. So there's inconsistencies in the definition and the transposition of that law into local practice. Then you've got the idea of the fact that crypto is so fast moving and there's new things all the time. So my advice is, like, where are you based? So we're obviously UK, right? So if and when we're not currently touching crypto, but if and when we do, we will align our controls to the UK interpretation of the travel rule. And again, what that says to me is, if you're able to send me the information I need on the payment instruction, I'll do business with you. And if you're not, then I won't. And again, that goes all back to us deciding our sort of lanes of comfort when it comes to risk and putting the controls in around that. So I think it'll change many more times, by the way, so don't quote me on any of that.
Okay. I see that we overcome a little bit our timing. Sorry for this from our participants, but we have a great session today. And I would like to say thank you, Tony and Marilyn, for participation and for explaining us so many questions during this webinar. And I would like to ask our participants to go to our LinkedIn page to leave their opinion as to their webinar, and probably leave some questions, and we will be able to answer them. And to make a nutshell of all our story is, it is not possible to say that every risk assessment is perfect, but there are some good habits and processes and tools you should consider implementing into your system to be more safe and to mitigate possible risk and fines. Thank you very much for this time and for this excellent opportunity to communicate with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great engagement in the chat as well. And thank you, Marilyn. I really enjoyed your talk.
No problem. Thanks, Tony.
Brilliant.
Thanks, guys. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Have a nice evening. Nice Friday evening.